Okay, so good morning, everyone. I can't be there today, but I still wanted you guys to take these notes and not get bogged down. We had missed class yesterday, and I wanted you to make sure that you got these notes today and were able to move forward in the class and not really lose another day of class. So today we're going to talk about wind erosion, and as you can see, wind erosion is also known as aeolian processes or erosion, aeolian erosion. This type of erosion is just the use of wind to carry particles. We had talked about erosion through water and how, weathering breaks the rock down, and then rivers and such carry the particles or sediments downstream. And that is the predominant method on the earth for weathering and erosion. But wind erosion is also a factor as well. And the last thing we're going to study, glacier erosion, is another very prominent method of weathering and erosion as well, especially where we live. But we're going to look at this today. So aeolian processes, and these occur most prominently in specific environments or terrain. So if we ask ourselves, where is this going to occur? It's going to be in dry climates and also places that have sparse tree cover. Now, the reason dry climates are so important is the fact that the soil needs to be loose. So if you think of an environment as a desert, there's not a lot of grass and ground cover on there to hold the soil down. So it already lends itself to losing the soil through wind erosion, from the start. Then also you have, in these kind of regions, you generally do not have a lot of tree cover, and that allows the wind to pick up speed and be very dominant kind of wind. If you've ever been out in the tundra, man, the wind just blows and blows and blows. You get like an area around here where there's trees after tree, and the wind at times can be strong, but generally if you're in the woods and amongst the trees, it's not very strong at all. So this type of erosion occurs in dry climates and areas also where there's very little tree cover. You can think of a really good example is Chitna, along the river there. There's not a lot of tree cover, and you have some wide open spaces where the river runs, especially that canyon. It really restricts and pushes all the air to that certain place, and it's kind of like you can really see wind erosion there. So if we continue going, this process of wind erosion includes detachment, where the particles are actually picked up from the ground, soil particles, and then they're transportation, where they're just carried by the wind a certain distance and then deposited somewhere else. And they can either form a sand dune or just get deposited on the bank of the river in Chitna, wherever it may be. But that's the main process: detachment, transportation, and deposition. There's two main methods. One is deflation, and this is the idea where particles are just lifted up, carried from one place to another, and then just deposited. And an example of this is sand dunes. This is really predominant in desert regions. There's not much else going on. The sand just gets carried from one dune to another dune to another dune, and then slowly over time it travels great distances. And that's deflation. But there's also another type of wind erosion that probably is more predominant, and that's called abrasion. So if you want to write that down. And we're going to look in a minute at what abrasion is and the landforms that it actually causes to form. And so hopefully you have that written down. So we're going to go to the next page here. And if you look at this. Okay, this is a little bit different. Sorry about this little gap there, but that's what happens when I put this page up like this. So particles are suspended in the air and then strike each other as well as other landforms. So not only are they carried when they're detached from the soil, but then they work on other objects, such as not themselves, but other sand particles in the air, and make them even smaller and finer. But they also pass by objects, such as rocks and cliff faces and those kind of things and work on them. And in the end, they form these aeolian landforms that we often see. If you've ever been to Utah and really all over the West Coast, there's many of these that you can see, especially Utah. Utah is just an amazing wind erosion landforms. An example of one is Arches. There's Arches National Park. There's Zion National Park, and I forget the other one in Utah. But just amazing things. And they form like these arches that look kind of like this, you know, like where the wind just worked through this rock right here and just wore a hole in it. And it looks like a little archway. And they have like these standing rocks, you know, I forget the other place, but oh well. So, but also we have some examples here. I'm going to show you some pictures. So you can see that these are wind erosion landforms. And then one example is Mushroom Rock. I'm going to show you here in a minute. And also Checkerboard Mesa, which is in Zion National Park. Zion has a lot of these kind of landforms. That's where this Checkerboard Mesa is. Sorry about the little squeak in there. Let's look at a couple pictures here so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. And let's erase that. And we'll go here, and here, we'll get away from this problem, we'll go here, and then we'll go, so here's our Mushroom Rock right here. You can see all of the lines that form in this rock. And at one time this was just one giant piece of rock everywhere, and the wind just slowly bore it away. And you can actually see it's like two different types of rock. This is real light colored, this is kind of dark colored. I don't think that's because of the shadowing. I think it's because they're different types of rock, and one is softer, so it breaks down a little bit further than the other. That's Mushroom Rock. This is an aeolian landform that's formed just from wind erosion. Another one that's is just amazing are these Checkerboard Mesas. And let me see if I can get these on here nice. When I seen this the first time, it was amazing. And you can see here on this, the grooves on here, almost like a checkerboard. You know, you could put some checkers on there and just have a game. But this is just through wind erosion that causes this to form. If we look at some other close-ups here, there's another one. You just see amazing what the wind can do with a little bit of sand particles, and how abrasion is just an amazing thing. Let's look at a few more. This is the one I saw right here in Zion. See another picture of it right here, and some other ones. You can see these are just amazing. This is just through abrasion, where particles in the air are carried. They strike this mesa and form grooves going vertically and horizontally in the rock. It takes a long time to form, but it's amazing what can be formed. Okay, that's what I realized here. And okay, let's continue on our notes though. We'll leave the cover off now. You can see, so we have these aeolian landforms. Wind speed and energy determine the distance that are traveled by these particles. So not all the particles travel the same amount of distance. And there's really three ways or three methods used to transport these particles. One is suspension. And suspension is for the really small particles. And this can be thousands of miles. So a particle is lifted up and it's just carried somewhere else. That's suspension, but it's only small particles. Then saltation is medium-sized particles. So these are somewhere between, like these particles right here are 0.1 mm or less. Okay, these are 0.1, 0.5 mm. Okay, and these are particles that are like lifted, but then they're so heavy that they fall back down. So this is just particles lifted up, it's carried, and then it's deposited somewhere else. Maybe another sand dune over here forms. Okay, here, this is the process where it's lifted up, falls back down. Lift it up, falls back down. Lift it up, falls back down. The same thing over and over. You can see how this particle would get worn away each time it hits the ground, but then it would also interact with the ground and form some abrasion or erosion on the ground as well. These are for medium-sized particles. And then the large particles are just, they're just kind of not very far at all. They're so large that they can't even almost be lifted off the ground, and they just drag across and erode away land as well. And that's called creeping. So that's kind of your notes on wind erosion. I just wanted to go over it with you. And if we go back here, I'm going to review it. Just keep in mind, two main methods of wind erosion are deflation and abrasion. And this deflation is just talking about particle lifted, transported somewhere else, forms sand dunes, really dominant in desert regions. And then abrasion is where particles are suspended in the air, then they strike other objects and wear them away, and then cause new landforms to form, such as the arches, such as the steps, I think they're called, staircases, and the mushroom rock, or mesa are examples of that. And this is all determined whether either abrasion or deflation are by the amount of wind energy and such and the size of the particles. And finally, it's a really small particle. They call it suspension, where the particle's just carried somewhere else. Saltation is where medium-sized particles are bouncing around the ground. They go up so high, then they come back down. And then creeping is where these really large particles, and they just get dragged across the ground. So that's your notes for wind erosion. Hope you guys have a nice day.